Again, want to welcome you to How to Think Like a Great Church Leader. My name is Ariel Nieves, and just for your viewing pleasure, being that we've already had some technical difficulties, I'd invite you to just consider turning everything off in the background. That'll kind of just help any of the downloading or the internet caching, all of those kind of issues. The second thing is make sure you guys, if you can, close the door, put your phone on send. That way we can just kind of stay focused, not be interrupted. And really, I want this to be a time of you investing in you. And so, one more time, I am a bit embarrassed for the technical difficulties, and I want to apologize. But so let's just kind of begin. So, before we end, I want you to just stay tuned to the end. I'm going to just share with you a bonus opportunity: 5 tips for doing more in less time. It's a bonus workbook that I've put together, PDF book, just about 5 things that I've kind of done to just help me to accomplish more, be more efficient with my time. So I know it'll be a benefit to you. And so I don't really know a lot about you, but I want to have an opportunity to get to know you, for us to get to know each other. So if you can, just do me a quick favor in the comment box below. Just kind of let me know, how do you feel about your leadership ability? How do you feel you're doing? Are you meeting your goals? Are your team succeeding? Is there room? Is there room for improvement? What do you feel like you're missing? And so, thank you so much, Jay Kai, for, I'm assuming that's John, for one improvement needed. It's getting better at motivating and building up others. Thank you so much for sharing that. And any other kind of comments, just kind of drop them in there. And the other question that I kind of have is, so what would be one improvement you'd like to make? Um, so what's one thing that you can do that would just kind of help you in terms of taking your leadership to the next level? And again, just kind of drop that right into the comment box below. It'd be just fantastic. Just again, hear from you and kind of get to know you a little bit. Um, all right. So just to keep it moving and just to ensure we end on time, I'm going to keep moving forward. And so I just want to kind of say that, just so you know, that you're in the right place if you want to learn to lead at a higher level. If that's one of your passions, this is absolutely going to be one of the things that you're going to get. So, if this is one of your desires, is to get to another level, you're going to get some of that today. The second thing is that if you're feeling inadequate, I'm sure that there's those moments where you kind of just feel like, I don't know if this has happened to you, but I just feel like, man, I'm in this place and it's kind of sink or swim, and I'm not 100% sure if I've got everything it takes to make it. And so there are some moments where I feel like what's required of me, I just can't meet it. So we feel inadequate, or maybe you worked so hard and you just don't see progress, and you feel like hamster on the wheel. It just feels like you're working, 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 um, but it just seems like you're having a hard time getting everyone, or getting the progress to go forward. So you're working really, really hard, but the needle's not moving forward. Or maybe you just kind of feel stuck. You find yourself trying everything, and your church doesn't seem to grow. Every strategy in the sun, and still no success. And we're going to talk a little bit about strategy in a moment. Or maybe you just feel like a fraud. I felt like this, where it's, you kind of get those mental thoughts of, who do I think I am trying to lead this, or what do I have to offer? And I just want you to know, even from the get-go, that you've got plenty to offer. But I understand what it's like to feel like a fraud. And really, because I'm the discipleship pastor at Christ Tabernacle. Obviously, I didn't start in that position. And I remember when I was asked to lead the discipleship department for the first time, I was about 28, 29 years old. I wasn't. I don't even think I was a deacon at our church. So I really didn't have any kind of title or leadership endorsement or title. Um, and at the same time, I'm given this department. I had to somehow lead 3 different pastors. One of those pastors was my mentor, who had taken me under his wings when I just gotten saved at the age of 17. And talk about feeling inadequate. I mean, I'm making decisions about people's spiritual walks and the impacts of it on their families. I mean, I remember having counseling appointments where parents were talking to me about their children. I didn't even know what to say to them because I wasn't a parent at that time. I had no clue. And I remember having this conversation with my wife. This is my wife here, and my 3-year-old son. And I remember feeling to my talking to her about how just inadequate and how I didn't feel like I was up for the challenge. I felt like I had a passion for what I was doing, but I had no clue. This is another shot of my son. I just figured I'd throw him in there, my 1-year-old son. But like I was saying, I was telling her, I was telling my wife, I had no clue what I was doing. It almost felt like I was just trying to throw stuff at a wall and hoping something would stick. And then around that time frame, I remember reading this article from charisma.com, and it really it said something that changed me. It really challenged me. And in essence, it said this. It said that the church is under resourced. In other words, it didn't have the monies. It doesn't have the monies that it needs to compete with the MTVs of the world. And so the only way that the church can really compete isn't more resources. It's not more money. I mean, especially if you're an inner city or a small church, right? You can be waiting on resources forever. The only way to stay relevant is by developing creative, thought-provoking, high-achieving leaders. I mean, what if the most important resource I have and you have isn't how much we can give or how many hours we can spend at the church or how many services we can sit in, but what if the most important resource we have is our thoughts, our insights, our ability to think critically and to challenge the status quo? What if the most important asset was becoming a thought leader or a high-end leader? And I began to really apply myself to learning, and I read books and I went to conferences. I volunteered for every challenge. So I could be stretched. And as soon as I found myself sitting at the tables learning from men like Chris Hodges from Church of the Highlands, and uh, uh, um, I was being coached by the small groups coach from Rick Warren from Saddleback, and sitting and having being developed leadership development with Craig Johnson, who's the executive pastor at Lakewood. And I just remember in all these moments really praying, God, I just want to be a sharp tool in your hand. I just want to be a sharp tool in your hand. And it just came to me that the most important resource you have, again, it isn't the bank accounts, it's not the finances, not the most important resource is the hearts and minds of our leaders. It's our commitment to learning and to growing and our commitment to the mission. And that's why in 2014 I started Thrive Church Coaching, and I've been really so blessed to be able to do this and be able to just pour out and just share some of the resources that have influenced me and share those with other churches. And so I created Thrive really for two major reasons, and one being to support small churches. And this is just the a lobby of a small church I've been coaching personally. The name of the church is El Tabernaculo. It's in New Jersey, and the associate pastor there, Ruth Rodriguez. We kind of worked on some of this together. Her building was a bit on the dilapidated side, and they invested some resources, and it's starting to make some real progress. And then, of course, the second, the agenda for today. So today we're going to just talk a little bit about how to think like a great church leader. And so let me give you the agenda. The agenda is simply this: we're going to talk about the importance of how we think. I'm going to give you 4 strategies on how great leaders think, and then I'll share a little bit about how we can help each other, and then we'll end our time with any kind of Q&A that you may have. And so if you've got any questions, just kind of write them down or put them in the comment box. I'll kind of take a look at them as we get a little bit closer to the Q&A time. And so here's the first thing I want you to know. And this is really the importance of how we think, because if we want to change how we behave, we have to change how we think. And this is really my premise for today. Because if we're looking for results, we can't just start looking at behavior, because behavior is really influenced by how we think. And so if we're looking at results, we've got to start looking at really how we think. If you want to change the bottom line, change your results, if you're not satisfied with your church growth or the success of your ministry, if you feel like you're struggling to keep a team engaged, or you're struggling to uh, just motivate other leaders and really get people rallied around. So before we look at some of the actions you're taking, let's examine the thought process behind them. And obviously, you know this verse. It says in Proverbs 23:7, "For as he thinketh, or as a man thinketh, so he is." And really, again, it's just reaffirming the idea that thoughts always precede behavior. And so, I have a good friend of mine. She's a missionary in Mumbai, India. And one of the things that they do is they actually go in and they rescue kids who are in a sex slave trade. And she was explaining to me that one of the things that they do is that in order to help them break the mentality of being a slave or being being oppressed, they started what they call a vision board. And on the vision board, they would just put down some of the thoughts that they had in terms of what they wanted to accomplish in their lives. You know, and one girl would say, "I wanted to be a dancer or a ballerina," and another girl would say, "Hey, I wanted to start a business," and another little girl would say, "I want to be a princess." And what that process was, it was really getting them to start thinking a certain way, so that they can break away from the oppressive mindset. Why? Because Nyasha knew this as much as all of us are going to learn this, that how we think, or before we can change behavior, we've got to begin by changing how we think. And so the most important contribution that you have is really your thoughts. It used to be manual labor, but now it's really your thoughts. It's what you bring to the table. And so I want to say this to you: if you're a pastor and you're looking to hire staff, don't hire doers, hire thought leaders. Hire leaders, because leaders are going to find volunteers. Leaders are going to find a way to do it. You know, you're gonna hire people. You want to hire people who are going to help stretch the organization. They may cost more. They're going to do exponentially more, or they're going to add exponentially more value to your organization. And if you're a ministry leader, you know, recruit these thought leaders into your ministry. You know, they're going to challenge your decisions, but because they challenge your decisions, what's going to happen is your decision making process is going to get better. You're going to be more successful. You're going to be able to grow your ministry at a faster rate. And so I want to just kind of challenge you and say, hey, don't just hire great thinkers, don't just lead great thinkers, but let's just in this process begin to become great thinkers. And so we're going to just go right into the four strategies for thinking like a great leader. And so strategy number one is stop thinking either or and start thinking and both. Stop thinking either or. And so either or thinking happens when you have two opposing ideas at one time. So let me give you an example of this. A couple of months ago, um, we kind of found ourselves in this kind of conflict where we had a men's conference in June, but right behind it in May, we had a women's conference. And so there would be all these conflicts in terms of finances, resources, support, marketing, because these two conferences were happening at the same time. And so you realize, hey, this was either or. We kind of was just like, okay, which one are we going to do, one or the other? But then we kind of stumbled on this concept of and or thinking. And Harvard Business Review says it this way: it says, great leaders are able to creatively resolve the tension between those two ideas by generating a new one that contains elements of the others, but is superior to both. Right? So great leaders are able to creatively resolve the tension between these ideas, between the two opposing ideas, really by generating a new one that contains elements of the others, and yet it's superior to both. And so, going back to the example between men's conference versus the women's fellowship, you know, we just had some challenges. Like I said, financial resources. There were those family dynamics. So we were ministering to the men who were husbands, and then someone had to stay home with the kids, or we were ministering to the women and the husbands had to stay home with the kids, and whatever those dynamics were. Some of our teams, they felt like they were fighting for the same resources. They didn't get the same airtime in regards to marketing. And so so that was either or thinking. And then we came up with this concept between the two where we came up with a family conference. And this is the and both thinking, where there were elements of the men's conference and elements of the women's conference, and we kind of put them together. And then we found other areas like singles and parenting that we weren't ministering to at all. And so what started as a, hey, how do we do a men's conference and a women's conference, and how do we resolve this conflict, became, man, this idea that was so much more greater, or had a greater impact than the two. And that's the concept between behind and both thinking. And so the thing is that and both thinking is really hard. And it's hard because it creates a sense of complexity. I mean, it was clean when the women did the women's conference and the men did the men's conference, but now it's like, who's leading this? Who's leading that? It's a little bit more complex, and it's messy because, you know, in some respects, now one department is kind of bleeding into another department, and there's no boundaries sometimes, because and both thinking isn't already predefined. This is different. This is new, and so because it's new, it's different. It doesn't look like some of the old things that we've done in the past. And both thinking is usually a mesh between two good things. And that's one of the things that's really challenging, because the enemy of what's great is usually what's good. And so we'll look at what's good and we'll settle, versus pushing past and saying, okay, well, what's best? Not just what's good, what's best. And so I want to share with you 3 steps to and both thinking. Hopefully, you've had an opportunity to download the study guide that I sent in the email. And so we're going to walk through some of those items in there. And so the first is step one. If you is you got to figure out the factors, and really figuring out the factors is really just creating a list of items you can't compromise on. And so for us, we just kind of said, hey, we've got to make sure that whatever we do, it's going to minister to the men, it's going to minister to the women. Whatever we're going to do, we don't want to compromise the message. We want to make sure that it's going to hit the families or hit homes. We also talked about the conferences being fully supported by the ministry teams, impacting homes and families, and so there was a lot behind it that were factors that we said, hey, whatever this new concept is, we just can't miss these items. We've got to make sure that whatever we're going to do, it's going to hit these items. And then step two is analyze the relationships. And so analyzing the relationships just simply means that now that we've got these items listed, we've got to then figure out how are these items now going to work alongside of each other. So ministering to men, ministering to women, as we dialogue a little bit, all of a sudden it's, hey, okay, this is family stuff. Or when we talked about the what's the message? Well, the overall message is we want better families, stronger families, better believers. Conferences with full support. We've got to make sure that whatever we're going to do is going to be fully supported. And so as we're analyzing the relationships between the two. And then finally, you've got to just make a decision, right? Once you analyze the relationships between the factors and you see if there's any connections, then you make a decision. And for us, we decided that the best decisions at that point was to combine the forces. So that's where we came up with the idea that the family conference may be more effective than anything than doing 2 separate conferences. And so that's strategy number one. We've got to stop thinking either or and start thinking and both. And like I said, it's a difficult process because it's going to take time. The solution, it's better solution. It's not going to just pop up on our laps. We've got to do the dirty work and dig and have meetings and pull people in and dialogue and push and push and push until we find that idea that we feel we're satisfied with. And so here's strategy number two. You've got to stop learning what leaders do and start learning how leaders think. Right? So you've got to stop learning what leaders do. And so when I first started leading small groups at Christ Tabernacle, I bought every book Willow Creek had, North Point had. I went on all the online small group seminars because I wanted to learn how to create an effective small group system. I wanted to learn how to do it. And then what I realized over some time is that strategies just don't transcend culture. Strategies don't transcend culture. And what I mean by that is that there's some strategies that may work at another church, but that doesn't mean they're going to work at my church. And because there's just so many different dynamics, there's the demographics of the people, there's financial resources, there's the actual personality of the church. There's just so many aspects of it. And so I would always say to you, don't focus on the strategy, take it, make it yours, but focus more on the thinking, because you can only make a strategy work when you understand the thinking behind it. And so let me give you 2 quick examples of pastors I've learned from in the last couple of years. And here's the first. Obviously, many of us have learned from Rick Warren, but I learned from him this concept of thinking exponentially. And it was something that I learned from our small group coach. I hired a small group coach a couple of years ago, about 5, 6 years ago. He happened to be the small groups coach under Pastor Rick Warren. Um, he was their small groups director at a certain point, and he did some of their assimilation. And so he kind of pulled me in. He tells me the story about how when he was launching small groups, he was looking to launch about 1,000 groups. That was their goal. And then Rick Warren pulls him to the side and they're having a conversation about it. And he said, no, 1,000, no, no, no. He said, we're going to have to add a zero to it. And so his eyes kind of almost fell out his socket. 10,000 people in small groups. Yeah, that was the goal. Now, did they hit their goal? No, they didn't. They missed it by about 5,000, but they blew past their original goal. And so think exponentially just really is this idea that when you have a goal, add a zero to it. Part of it is really believing that our God wants to do what seems to be impossible for us. Because sometimes I feel like we create safe goals, goals that are easy to achieve. But when we're thinking exponentially, let's create big impact goals. How can what we're going to do reach more people? How can what we're going to do really impact others? And so that's the first, think exponentially. The second is this idea of thinking systemically. And I was able to meet Chris Hodges personally a couple of times. I've gone down to conferences at his church. He's actually come up to do ministry at our church. And he said this in one of the dinners that we were at. He just simply said, you can't build a church on a personality but you've got to rather build it on systems. And he said, because when you build a church on a personality, it dies with the person. But when you build a church on systems, it doesn't matter who's in the lead, who's the lead pastor, the church is going to continue to go forward because everybody knows their jobs. And so I've had to now take this and start looking at some of the areas in my ministry and say, hey, how much of this is progressing because of my personality, and how much of it is actually repeatable, sustainable? See, I've had to think differently now. So now when I'm building a ministry, I'm trying hard not to take myself out of it so that the ministry is sustainable even when I'm not there. And so that's the second strategy. Stop learning what leaders are do and start learning how leaders think. Stop learning what leaders do and start learning how leaders think. And in the workbook I provided, there's the opportunity for you just kind of as the activity, just list two names of pastors that you want to learn from. And this is super important. I want to challenge you to do this because part of our growth is really about learning from others. So there are some people who are ahead of us. Let's learn from them. There's buy their books, there's read their blogs, there's listen to their sermons, and push past the strategies and really learn about how they think, how they see things, what some of their philosophies behind their decisions. Because when you start to understand their philosophies, then you start to understand why they're making certain decisions. And then you can apply those philosophies because I think principles can transcend culture. Strategies may get stuck in the culture. And so you want to make sure that you are being intentional about learning from others. Here's the third thing, and this is crucial, especially for those of you who kind of said that they want to learn how to motivate others in terms of serving and working. So you need to stop being the genius and start using the collective genius. You need to stop being the genius and start using the collective genius. And so this term collective genius is really a term that was coined by Liz Wiseman in her book Multipliers. It's a book that I had my team read a couple of months ago. And really the concept of uh, um, collective genius is that good leaders, they use their intelligence to amplify the smart and capability of the people around them. To make it simpler, you've got to make the people around you better. I mean, if you're a sports fanatic, you've heard this said all the time. They'll say this a lot. The commentators will say this a lot about. I'm from New York, so I can make this comment about Carmelo Anthony, where they'll say, "Hey, he doesn't make his team better, but you compare him to LeBron James, and LeBron James makes his team better. He passes and he gets everyone involved in the game. And so when you're looking at your teams, especially your core teams, do you make them better? And here's the thing behind it. Really, the concept is that we is always greater than me. I love one quote that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go further, go together. And so here's the thing. When we're looking at our people, logic says that if you want to accomplish great things, because our people are overworked, if you want to accomplish great things, you're going to need more resources. And the thing is that I've found that people are overworked while simultaneously being underutilized. People are overworked while being underutilized. And what I mean by this simply is this is that just because someone is busy doesn't mean that they're giving or they're adding the most value they could to the organization. Sometimes we've got people who are in the wrong spots, they're in the wrong place. So they're great, they're faithful, they're there, but they're not in the place where they can actually lead best. And so when we talked a little bit about motivating people, one of the questions is, are people leading in alignment with their giftings, with how God has designed them? because I know this. I know that there are certain things that if you want me to get that job done, you're gonna have to remind me a million times because I have no heart for it. I don't have a passion for it. I'm dragging my feet. But then there's certain things that I have a passion for. It's innate. It comes from inside of me. And so as a leader, I've got to look for that in the hearts of people. I can say, oh man, every time I give this individual that kind of responsibility, spark something in him. Let me now examine that. How can I best utilize him? How can I get the best from this individual? And the challenge is that truthfully, we don't pay any attention to how we can better use our current volunteers. Right? We pay attention to the mission, we look at some of the responsibilities, but we don't necessarily pay attention to how we can best utilize our volunteers. And so let me give you four quick steps for utilizing the collective genius. And here's step number one. You've got to learn to expect the best from people. Man, that's just key. You've got to expect the best from people because the reality is that what you expect from people, that's what you're going to get. And I find people give you what you expect. And there's some moments when people are over their heads. I'll give you that. That's absolutely true. But how you think of your people will always reflect on what you get from them. How you think of your people will always reflect on what you get from them. If you think they're short-sighted or incapable, guess what? They're never going to get the job done. But if you think that they're good, then they're gonna accomplish. They may even surprise you on how much they can accomplish for you. Here's the second step. You've got to remove the fear of failure. People need to know that it's safe to try and to fail. When I was an intern at 9X, I heard this story. I was about 20 years old, and my mentor or mentee at that point, mentor, he told me the story about this one guy who comes into the office of the CEO with his resignation letter in his hand, and he says to him, "Listen, I made a big mistake. I made a huge error. It cost the organization close to $1 million, and so here's my resignation letter." And the CEO said, "I absolutely cannot accept this. And the reason I can't accept this is because I just spent $1 million educating you." And see, education, any kind of education, with the people under us as we're ministry leaders, pastors, there's an education process for the people who are leading ministries. They're learning how to lead. They're learning how to be under shepherds per se. They're learning the responsibilities and the task and how to be faithful. And so education costs in the short term, right? The price of failure is short term, but its return in the long run is always exponential. You're going to get, if you stick with it, you're going to get so much more. It's like stocks. I have an investor. He tells me this all the time. He says, hey, if you get nervous every time you lose on the short term, you're never going to gain in the long run. So be at ease, be at peace. Let remove the fear of failure. People are going to fail. And then from there, you can get a return get a return on them because it's going to take time for them to grow. Here's step number three. You got to learn how to challenge your people. Here's the bottom line. You've got to put them in places that they're going to be stretched. You got to stretch them. You got to stretch them. You got to stretch them. I've done this a lot with certain people on my team where I've given them responsibilities, or I've given them certain tasks, projects, short-term projects that had nothing to do with their responsibilities, nothing to do with their comfort zones. Some of the people on my team could do their jobs with their eyes closed, and I would put them in another spot, and they'd be like, "What are you doing to me?" And I said, "I'm stretching you, because if you're going to get better, you're going to have to get stretched." Here's step number four. You've got to debate decisions. And here's what I mean by that. Don't make decisions on your own. Debate the issues up front with the people around you, especially your core team. Talk about motivating people. If someone on your team actually gets to speak into the process or the decision making, how on board are they going to be with that decision? Man, they're going to be on fire. They're going to be like, "Hey, we're so excited about this." It's when we allow them to speak into the decision making process that it leads to decisions that people understand, right? Because they were a part of the dialogue. They got to go behind the scenes and they can execute because they understand clearly. And here's the thing about this. I'm not saying that they are going to make the final decision. I'm not saying that at all. But what I am saying is that they should have an opportunity to give you their thoughts, to influence your thinking in regards to the direction you want to go. And of course, it's like anything. It's like any kind of you know meat. You chew the meat, you spit out the bones. So if people give you bones, just spit it out. But if people give you meat, then you want to marinate on that because it can influence your decision making. Here's step number four, as we talked. Strategy number four. So strategy number three, of course, we just said, you've got to use the collective. Don't be the genius. Utilize the collective genius in the room. And strategy number four is this: you've got to stop reacting and start thinking critically. You got to stop reacting. Most pastors, most church leaders, they spend their time, they spend their day putting out fires, right? There's marriage crisis, there's building issues. I was talking with one leader recently, and he was telling me of all the challenges with the people and in the ministry. And I said, man, with all those people issues you may be having, with all those fires you're putting out, there is no way that you're progressing in the ministry forward because all you're doing is putting out fires. And listen, we're pastors, we're not firefighters. We're pastors, and I get that we deal with people. Absolutely understand that. But there are certain fires that we're constantly putting out. We may have to build a system around that. Maybe it requires us to add more people to counseling. Maybe we've got to funnel people into small groups, into some discipleship processes so people can grow, people can mature. But the bottom line is we shouldn't be spending the entire day putting out fires. Friday night shouldn't be when we start studying for our sermons on Sunday. The decisions that we're making in regards to our ministry, we shouldn't be making them on the fly. There should be thought process behind the time. And so again, most pastors, they spend their day putting out fires, and the result is that we're so busy, but we don't make any progress. We're so busy, we don't make any progress. So here's a couple of ways, a couple of steps to thinking critically, thinking strategically. Here's number one: learn to anticipate. You've got to learn to go beyond the issues, beyond the moment, and learn to look ahead. Right? You've got to go beyond the issues. And for some of us, what that may mean practically is you've got to get a calendar. You've got to decide ahead of time, what is it that you want to get done, and make the time to do it. Take the time out to do it. What do you want to get done? Take the time out and do it. Here's the second thing: you've got to have a vision. You've got to have vision. What are your future goals? Where do you want to take the ministry? Where do you want to take your organization? You got to have a vision. And so here's a quick example of a vision statement. Again, if you look at your workbook, I've included this in there and given you an opportunity to enter or create your own vision statement. And the vision statement simply breaks down like this. It's four sentences. And the first one says, I am a. And so if I was personally filling that out, I would be saying, I am a pastor, I'm a blogger, um, who serves, right? Who's the constituency? Who is it that I'm serving? And so I serve pastors and church leaders of small churches. That would be again mine, so that they can. And what is it that I'm helping them do? How am I helping them so that they can, for me again personally, learn leadership principles in order to become what? So what's the outcome? What's the promised outcome that we have for our people? And so again, going back to my example, so that they can grow their ministry and grow their church, or in order to grow their ministry and grow their church. And that's the outcome. So if I was filling this out, I would say I am a pastor and a blogger who serves pastors and churches of small churches so that they can learn leadership principles in order to grow their ministry and grow their church. This is one of the most important things that you can get. If you get anything out of this uh, webinar today, out of this training today, get this. You need a vision statement. You can't just go aimlessly. What's the direction that God is taking you? And as you do the vision statement, just make sure you're measuring outcomes, right? Because whatever you put in is going to give you something on the other side. So if you put in junk, you get out junk. But if you put in effort and energy and time, you're going to get results. And so measure the outcomes, because when you measure the outcomes, it tells you a lot about what you've put into the process, into the time. And here's the next step. You've got to think critically, right? So what are your future goals? What do you want the organization to look like? And here's a couple of things. So when you're thinking critically, you got to dig beyond feelings. This is about facts. It's not about feelings, because so many times we feel certain things and we can be wrong. We could be wrong. There's so many times that we may be right. But when we feel something, let's dig past the feeling and do some of the research to either confirm our feelings or to realize that our feelings are off. The next thing is you got to analyze the facts. So once you have facts, analyze them. What do they mean? What do they say to you? What are they speaking about? And then ask lots of questions. Ask people questions. Again, if you want to bring people in close, if you want to motivate people, ask them questions. Let them help you figure things out. Of course, as you once you gather your information, you're going to go on your own. You're going to pray. You're going to seek God's face. But you're not going to. That information is not just going to come from you. It should come from the people around you. Trust me, they've got a lot to say. And the last thing is you want to challenge the status quo. You want to challenge the status quo. And so that's step three. You want to think critically. And the next step, of course, if you want to make a decision. And here's the thing about making a decision. I hear this all the time. I constantly hear people say, hey, I don't want to get the decision wrong. And they understand it. You don't want to make a mistake. You don't want to cost the organization any money, time. You don't want to dishonor God. I get it. But the problem with that thinking is that you can't redirect a parked car. You can't make a decision. If you don't make a decision, if you don't go in a direction, you can't be redirected. If the car is parked, doesn't matter which direction the car is parked in, it's not heading anywhere. But if a car is driving and it's heading in the wrong direction, it can always be redirected. So don't be afraid to make decisions. And here's the next thing, step five. Once you make a decision, the entire organization needs to be aligned to support that decision. So what changes do you have to make to the organization? What kind of changes do you have to make to the way maybe you lead the organization? So you've got to make these changes to help you accomplish the goals that you've laid out. And so at this point, what do you think? I mean, do you think if you started thinking and both, right, pushing for the best ideas versus settling for the obvious choice, or if you started learning from others, not just what they did, but how they think, if you started learning not just strategy, but the importance of the thinking process behind the strategies, if you started tapping into the collective genius, the ideas, the wisdom found in your team, or if you stopped spending your time putting out fires issue after issue and spent more time thinking strategically, do you think that you'd begin to make a difference in your church or in your ministry? Do you think you can take your church to the next level? Let me say this. I don't really know why you showed up, but I'm going to take a guess. I'm going to assume that some of you are here because you're tired of not getting the expected results, right? You're probably just tired of trying, and not seeing the end result that you think you should be seeing. It's this idea of reaping and sowing, right? You're reaping or you're sowing, but you're not reaping what you're sowing. You're kind of wondering, what is it? I'm putting all my energy, all my time, all my effort, and I'm just not seeing the church grow. I'm not seeing people grow spiritually. Or maybe you're thinking, hey, God's got more, and you're just not sure how to get there. So you've got this feeling in your heart where you know that God's got more for you. I've heard pastors say it this way: our church is going to go to the next level. My ministry, my leadership, I want to take it to the next level. You're just not sure how to get there. Or maybe bottom line, you just need help. You're just at a place where you're saying, man, I really need some help. I'm in this. I feel like I just jumped into the pool, sink or swim, and man, I need a lifeguard because I am sinking. Or maybe you're just tired of mediocre ministry, right? You personally might be committed to excellence, but it's been so hard to get your team to be committed to excellence. Or maybe you just want to invest in your potential, right? People have been saying to you that there's this, God's got a plan for you, and you know it. You feel it in your heart. You feel it deep within, but you just don't know how to develop your potential. You don't know how to go from potential to actual. Or maybe you just have a heart for people, right? You just love people, and you just want to grow so that you can help grow them. I get it. I get it. You know, maybe you have a passion and you just need the skills. And so I want to say to you that it's time. Now is the time. It's time to take your church. It's time to take the ministry to the next level. And really, it begins with you. It begins with your commitment to growing as a leader. That's why I appreciate you jumping on at 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon for this webinar, for this training, because it's investing in yourself and your time. And I want you to know that everything that I've shared with you today, nothing is theory. Everything I've shared with you today is stuff that I do on a daily basis. And really, I do when I see success with it. And I've committed myself to learning because I understood that my growth would impact church growth. Now, did it take time? Oh yeah, it did absolutely. It took time. It took commitment. It took a financial investment on my part. You saw the picture with those books, and those books weren't for free. I had to buy those books. I had to invest time. I had to read. I had to really invest. If I wanted to see growth, I had to take the time to do it. Let me say this: I would have given anything to have someone pour into me and coach me. I would have given anything to have someone just to kind of come alongside and help me get further faster. And what I would do is I would go to different individuals and say, "Hey, would you disciple me? Would you coach me?" And people meant well, but some of them didn't have the time, or they didn't know where to start, or they would just kind of give me a book, and so I had to figure it out on my own. But it doesn't have to be the same for you. And so here's the question I have for you: Do you want to take your leadership to the next level? Do you want to be? Do you want to take your leadership to the next level? Because what I know is this: if you grow, your church is going to grow. If you grow, your church is going to grow. And so I want to welcome you to how I can help you. And it's called Thrive, Thrive's membership site. And so Thrive is simply a monthly premium online community for people looking to lead ministries. This is for people who are looking to grow their churches and tackle the challenges of leading a life giving organization. Thrive helps pastors, ministry leaders, lay leaders become super effective leaders who are transforming neighborhoods, they're impacting lives, and fulfilling their God given assignment. See, now I want to tell you quickly about what you can expect to get out of this Thrive program. However, I want to tell you about a quick phone call that I recently had. So this is Ruth, who I mentioned earlier when I mentioned her church in the beginning. And so she's one of the pastors at her parents' church, El Tabernáculo. Her parents are the senior pastors there. And so me and Ruth, we were on a coaching call, and Ruth and one of her other core team members, they were just shouting, "It works, it works." I had no clue what they were talking about. They only had 60 members, and their building was a mess. But we were starting to see some momentum. People were starting to join the church. Some people were starting to get saved. And they had a major roadblock. And the problem was that the lobby was horrible. The bathrooms were horrible. The building was decrepit. And after a couple of months of coaching them, they decided to try one of the strategies that I shared with them. And I said to them this: I just said, "Hey, if you invest in your church, the people around you are going to see the investment and they're going to be all in." And so they invested $1,000 in their lobby. That same Sunday, they made a challenge to the congregation regarding fixing the bathrooms. And I told them, you've got to make sure that the appeal is about the gospel, right? We're not just fixing the bathrooms because we want the building to look beautiful. We're fixing the bathrooms because we want the building to be attractive to guests, to visitors who come to the church. And so that day, they made this appeal. They needed $4,000 to fix their bathrooms. They raised 4,700. And so I share this with you because I want you to understand the kind of impact that we together can make on the kingdom. And so let me tell you what you're going to get each month. And so each month there's going to be a theme or a topic that we're going to tackle together. And then on top of the topic, every single month we're going to have so these are some of the examples of the topics. So we talked about in September, talked about customer service, and in October we talked about a Halloween alternative, and currently for this month we're talking about creating a culture of excellence. And so every week there's a new resource we're providing. And so week one is our master class, and this is a step-by-step training on that month's topic. Week two, there are certain resources, what I call done for you resources. These are resources that I've actually used myself, checklists and project plans and assessments for the month that you can just put right to use. This is an example of one of the resources. It's called My Ideal Work Week. And in essence, you can see what my week usually looks like. And so this is a resource to help me plan my week out because it's my time. And what I want to do is I want to make sure I manage my time. And so you'll see stuff like breakfast with my wife and the boys. That to me is super important. So even though I'm ministry and I'm involved, I've got to make sure that I'm managing my time appropriately. And then another thing, so this is week three. So week two is resources. Week three is personal development. And this is where we talk about how that specific topic pertains to you. Maybe how you can model it or how you can grow in it. We may even get a little bit personal, talk about family dynamics and those kind of areas, because the bottom line is that the health of the leader, the health of the leader really determines the health of the church. And then week 4, we'll do some expert interviews. And this is where you get to submit questions to an expert that I'm interviewing for the month. And we'll be connecting with, this month, we're going to actually be connecting with Diana Dennis. She's the director of the Legacy Center, and they help close to 300 families a week. Every Tuesday, they go out and they feed the homeless. Every Friday, they open up their doors to 150 plus families who are able to get, they're able to get food, they're able to get clothing there, all for free. And she operates this uh, with only 3 paid staff. Everyone else is volunteers. Let me say, I've gone there during the middle of the week, and it's full of volunteers. And so somehow they do this with excellence. And so I just want to share this with you so we can just together give you an opportunity to learn from some of these experts. And so this is what you're going to learn. Obviously, you're going to learn step-by-step strategies, right? Because I'm going to tell you what to do, but I'm also going to, until more importantly, tell you why you need to do it. So I'm going to tell you what to do, but I'm going to tell you why. I'm also going to share with you ideas like how to develop a team. These are some of the topics, themes we're going to cover. We're going to talk about creating a culture of excellence, how to get everyone around you to really give 100% effort. We're going to talk about managing the tensions between family and ministry. Right? If you've done anything in ministry, you know that there are some times where the demands of ministry can kind of seep into the family time. Or there's some moments where you're in the middle of family time, but there's an emergency, you've got to get up. And how do you manage those tensions? We're going to talk about emotional health, because the bottom line is that you can't be spiritually mature if you're emotionally immature. That's just the bottom line. And so we're going to talk a little bit about leading from your calling, because the bottom line is that if God has called you, there's an overflow from that. You're leading from that calling. And this is what you're going to get. You're going to get full access to the membership site. You're going to be able to download and share resources, right? So if you're part of the team, you're going to have an opportunity to actually share with your core team, with other ministry leaders that are around you. You're going to get done for your resources. Like I said earlier, these are resources you could download, put to use. You're going to get the best training we've got. I mean, we're not going to hold back on anything. We're going to give you everything, and we're going to give you all the things that we're currently learning, because we're constantly learning ourselves, and we want to be able to share those things with you. And so here's one of the bonuses that we want to give you. It's called How to Get More Done While Avoiding Burnout. And this was a webinar training I did a couple of months ago with one of our coaches, Andy Maldonado. And he just had an opportunity to share with us about 3 or 4 years ago, more like 5 or 6 years ago. He went through a burnout to a point where he couldn't even get out of bed. And he was so just emotionally overcome and overwhelmed because of ministry and burnt out. And he went through this process of just kind of getting healthy again. And for the last couple of months, last couple of years, he's kind of helped me in terms of managing some of those stresses. He's been fantastic. And here's the reality: people who are learning to lead or are in any kind of scenario of leadership, right? We wear 100 hats. Not only is it church responsibilities, but family responsibilities. So you can go get so consumed with growing your church, and then one day you look up and you're exhausted emotionally, physically. You've allowed certain things into your life that shouldn't have been there. And so that's how you avoid burnout. And then there's what I call a fast acting bonus. Is the bonus I talked to you about in the beginning. And it's called 5 tips for doing more in less time. And these are some of the strategies I've implemented, because the bottom line is that the demand on us can be super overwhelming. But what I've kind of learned and what I've wanted to do is, even though there's this demand, I've got to make sure that I've got my life in control, my time in control. And so I know some of you may be thinking, so what's the investment? And so the overall value of the program, this is all of the master training, downloadable resources, the personal development lessons, the expert interviews, and this is each month for the next 12 months. This is stuff like how to avoid burnout, the bonus, and the fast acting bonus is $549. But this is how much we're going to make it available to you. We want you to know that there's a 30-day money-back guarantee. And the reality is you can cancel at any time. So for the next 30 days, if you don't like the program, you feel like it's not for you, you can cancel. You'll get your money back, no problems, no questions asked. And then after that, you can cancel anytime. There's no contract. And so to get full access for the course, It's just $20 a month. That's it. $20 a month. It's really inexpensive. And the reason that we've priced it at $20 a month is because we want every single small church leader to have no excuse, no reason why they can't get the training that they need. There's no reason why you've got to do ministry on your own. We want to do it with you. And so you can just go, this is the website where you can sign up for it, thrivechurchcoaching.com. Once, what you'll be able to do is there's a page, and once you get onto the sign up page, and you'll get immediate access to the site. So at this, just kind of want to mention, if there are any questions, you can just put comments into the you can put into the comments area, and you can just ask any questions in regards to the program, in regards to the Thrive to training site, or in regards to some of the things that we talked about today. I will probably sit around for the next maybe 5, 10, 15 minutes, however long you guys have questions for, and we'll kind of go from there. All right, so if there are any questions, you can just put it right into the comment box, and then we'll kind of go from there. All right, so one of the questions is in regards to just this idea of thinking critically or putting out fires. So I get it. I mean, the bottom line is that some of us are just extremely overwhelmed with, the busyness, and because we're in the people business, some of those things are super important. But I would say to you that it's not enough. It's not enough to say, hey, well, this is an issue. I think you've got to ask the question, what kind of issue is it? So, for example, there have been some times that I've gotten calls, and I knew that this could wait till the next day. And I said, you know what, right now, why don't we do this? Why don't we all sleep on it? Why don't we pray about it? And then tomorrow, let's get together in my office and we'll talk. Now, there were some other issues that I knew that I had to take care of immediately, on the spot. There was no way I can let this thing go beyond the moment. So those issues were emergencies, but they were actually they weren't just urgent, they were important. And what happens is that so many times in ministries, what's urgent trumps what's important. And so we've got responsibilities that may not, that impact the entire church. And so I measure some of those challenges, those issues that way. I just kind of ask the question, hey, so is this going to impact the entire church? And if the answer is no, and it doesn't impact the entire church, then I've got to just take a moment and decide, is that something that I feel I should be doing at the moment? Or is there certain systems, are there any systems that need to be put in place to help me handle some of these issues? So, so that's where that kind of lays in regards to making sure that you're not spending your entire day putting out fires. So another question was, well, how do we keep a team engaged? Well, I think one of the major ways to keep a team engaged is really to keep them connected. And so when we talk about the collective genius, it's this idea that the people around you, they add value to the ministry. What they do matters. How they give, what their input matters. And so I think that there's this innate desire in all of us to be valued. And so because there's this innate desire in all of us to be valued, we have got to make sure that if people are valued, if we really value people, that we allow them into the decision-making process. And that is a part of this whole idea of making people feel valued. And so, you've got to absolutely do that. You've got to just take the time to keep people engaged by giving them permission to add value. Now, let me say this. There are some people who will not add value or are not committed. And that's absolutely right. That's fine. That's where they're at spiritually. And if that's fine, then I just know that I can't use them, and I may have to move on. And so keeping people engaged is a two-way street in the sense that, hey, I want to keep you connected, but when I make my effort, you've got to also respond by giving me your effort. Another question was just about this idea of letting teams fail, or letting people fail. And so failure is really a part of the development process. It's just the bottom line. It's if failure is a part of the development process. And so you've got to be okay with the fact that people are going to fail. And if people fail, this is an opportunity for you to coach them, for you to put your arms around them. And so when we're talking about building people or growing people up, there are what I would call traditional settings, which is like a classroom setting where we're going to talk, I'm going to teach, you're going to learn. There's more of that one-on-one interaction where, hey, we're going to just dialogue. You can ask me personal questions, I'll answer them. There's this idea of shadowing people, and shadowing people meaning, hey, come see me preach, come be with me, come see me run this meeting, and then afterwards we may talk. And then there's coaching where you do something, and now I come alongside and I give you some pointers and I give you some tips. And so those are different opportunities or different ways that you can build people up. Here's the bottom line is that building people up really takes time. I had one guy just kind of ask me, hey, so how do I find someone like you at my church? And I said, man, you got to grow them. You got to grow people. You got to invest in them. You got to give them books. You got to come back and let them ask questions. You just got to get in it. Again, if you got any questions while I'm answering some of these questions, you can just pop the questions right into the comment box. And so, yeah, you've got to be able to do those things. You've got to get involved or invested in your lives and pour into them. I've got time for two more questions. Two more questions. So how do we know if people are being utilized properly? That's a great question. So that's kind of going back to the whole collective genius and people just being overworked. So you know if people are being utilized or underutilized, by just asking them, and of course take a look at their outcomes. Take a look at the goals that you have and the results, and are the results matching up to your goals? And then ask the question why. What's missing in this process? It could be that the system just doesn't work. You've got a system going, whatever it is, an assimilation system, small group system, whatever it is, and maybe the system doesn't work. Maybe the system is broken, because you could have the right people and have the wrong system. But sometimes the system isn't broken. You just don't have the right people or the right effort. And so the question becomes, what are the people's giftings, and are their current responsibilities taking full advantage of their giftings? So even in our in the Thrive the membership site, we've got a spiritual gift assessment. And so that spiritual gift assessment allows you to ask the question, how are you gifted? How are you made? And if you're made this way, am I putting you in the right place? Am I taking full advantage of how God has designed you? And that's what I mean by underutilized, is that there are people who God has designed a certain way, but we're not taking advantage of that. All right, so one last question before we jump off. Let me just pick one last question here. So, the question is, how do we learn from leaders when we don't even really know them? That's a great question. So there's a lot of people I've learned from that I have no clue who they are, and they don't know who I am. And the way you learn from them is you can buy books. I mean, and if you don't have the time to read, there's audio books. I make it my business to try to listen to people's podcasts while I'm driving to work. So you can read books, you can listen to audio books, you can listen to sermons. There's conferences you could attend. Um, but I would say instead of following just random conferences, I like to follow specific people, because there are specific people that have a message that I resonate with, or a message that I need. It doesn't mean that I'm following that person for the duration of the time. It just means that, for the rest of my life, I'm not following Rick Warren. But there was a season where I was. And for the rest of my life, I'm not following Chris Hodges. But there was a season where I was. One of my favorite authors is Ken Blanchard. He's, a management guru. There was a season where I read almost everything he put out. Now I'm in a different season. And so you follow people for a season, but you follow their books, you follow their sermons, their conferences. You try to, some of them are now with the whole blogging, how the blogging is taking off. Many of them are bloggers, many of them are on podcasts. And so you want to just make sure that you take the time to listen to as many people as possible. All right. Well, if there's no other questions at this point in time, I'm going to just kind of jump off. And I want to just once again thank you guys all for, first of all, your patience with me with the technology. We've gone into about 4:17. I wanted to try to end around 4:10. If you've got any other questions that I did not answer, you can email me. My email is Ariel, Ariel, at thrivechurchcoaching.com. You can also find me on Facebook, which is find us, look us up, Thrive NYC, or you can look us up on Twitter. And my Twitter handle is at Ariel Nieves. So you can kind of check us out in those three different areas. Hopefully, we'll see you inside on the Thrive Coaching site, and we'll be putting out some more different content like this. And so we look forward to seeing you then. All right, God bless, take care, and we will talk again soon. May God bless your ministry.